Hey there YouTube lovers, my name is BB8's and today I am going to review Resident Evil 2, the remake from 2019. I don't think I've ever said this before, but prior to playing Resident Evil 2, I literally had no experience with the Resident Evil series at all, meaning that Resident Evil 2 was my first ever Resident Evil game. I was thinking about Resident Evil 4 being my starting point for the Resident Evil series, but considering that Resident Evil 2 was requested to me in my BB8's House Reviews request form a few months back, but considering I didn't have access to the game in any form, luckily it was on PlayStation Plus, so I was able to give it a play, and my god, I've never been more anxious playing a game in my life. And I haven't even played Resident Evil 4 yet, so I don't know if it's going to be more scary than this. But back on topic, you're all here for the one question. What did I think of Resident Evil 2? You're about to find out. So, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? For the gameplay in Resident Evil 2 revolves around either Leon Kennedy or Claire Redfield. I played through the game as a Leon Kennedy person, and no matter which of the two you play as, the game plays out like a survival horror game where you get trapped inside Raccoon City Police Department headquarters, and you have to find a way out by solving puzzles which are very engaging to solve and well designed, such as unlocking safes or finding an electrical part to deactivate a certain barrier that's preventing you from accessing that specific area. The survival horror elements within Resident Evil 2 are fairly balanced, as you have limited resources to work with, and every time you move around Raccoon City Police Department, it makes you think carefully on what your next move is going to be, especially with characters such as Mr. X or T00, depending on what you prefer to call him. Like, this character literally gave me anxiety whenever he appeared on screen, and that is what made the second act of the game more tense for me, since it's unpredictable where within the Raccoon City Police Department headquarters he could be. And what really impressed me with Resident Evil 2 is how the horror and puzzle elements are executed, especially in the second act where Mr. X comes in, and the third act where you go down with Ada Wong to the laboratory. The sound design does play a big part in the gameplay as well, especially since you can hear footsteps, zombie roars, barks from zombie dogs, and footsteps of Mr. X. I literally played the entirety of Resident Evil 2 with headphones on, and because of how well the sound design is integrated into Resident Evil 2, I definitely recommend playing this with headphones on, because the feeling this game is going for is more effective that way. For the graphics and the performance, the graphics in Resident Evil 2 are phenomenal, and even if realism is a bit overdone in modern day gaming, Resident Evil 2 is a different argument because it really benefits from more realistic graphics. I haven't played the original from 1998, but I can safely say for now that the Resident Evil 2 remake definitely benefits from all the lighting effects. But if you take away from the lighting for 1 second, I would say that the horror elements such as zombies and blood really make this experience more impactful. The horror isn't too light, the horror isn't too extreme to make this an AO rating game. I wouldn't be reviewing this game if it was AO rated anyway, it's just right. But on the technical side of things, the game runs pretty smoothly. Throughout my experience with Resident Evil 2, I've not had any frame rate dips. The lifelike visuals make the horror more impactful, especially with the jump scares, and while there are many people that argue with me and say that realism in gaming is overused and overrated, but in places like Resident Evil, where it really benefits from realism to make the horror experience more impactful. And if you really want to get the Resident Evil experience, play the game with no lights on and only the TV, with a pair of headphones, is more impactful that way. For the characters, Resident Evil 2 introduces a great roster of characters, with Leon Kennedy being the lead. In Resident Evil 2, Leon Kennedy is a rookie cop with courage and is determined to do what's right, making Leon Kennedy a likable protagonist. Other characters include Claire Redfield, who I didn't get an awful lot of time with because I played Leon's story for the review, and Ada Wong was another interesting character as well, who you actually do get to play as for a little bit, and to be fair, I felt like Ada Wong was a more serious character, but became more villain-like towards the end of the story. And the one thing that does make me curious is how she appears to have died at the end, but I've seen her in promotional art for Resident Evils 4 and 6, which I am yet to play, but I'll get the answer on how she survived there. And Mr. X, who by far is the scariest character in the game. Every time this guy was on screen, I literally had anxiety going through me. No matter how many times I encountered him throughout the second act, he always made me jump. The final boss against Mr. X in his true form wasn't as scary, but still worked for me. For the story, considering that this is my first Resident Evil game, it makes me glad that I didn't start from 6, only because I've heard it's the least scary of the franchise. But Resident Evil 2 was a different argument there, because it provided an impactful experience with jump scares and storytelling. The writing is well done, and the story is well paced, and while each of the 3 acts do have their own focus, with the first act involving an attempted escape from Raccoon City Police Department while trying to solve the mystery of the T-virus outbreak. The second act introduces Mr. X, which does make the second act the most impactful act in terms of horror. And finally, the third act, which takes us down to the underground lab where the T-virus broke out. And I do think in terms of lore, the third act is the most impactful. And while I've only played Leon Kennedy's campaign, it still left a strong impression of what's to come for me when playing the rest of the Resident Evil series, especially with the fantastic execution of horror and story, which makes Resident Evil 2 an experience I'm sure that I won't forget. After all, this is my first Resident Evil game, but as a taster for what to expect from the rest of the Resident Evil franchise, I'm now on board. The remake of Resident Evil 2 isn't just a remake, it's a complete reimagining of survival horror as a whole. Every aspect of this game is well done, with puzzle-solving gameplay to its nerve-shotting atmosphere, and everything about the game is sure to have you on edge throughout the whole run. And the remake of Resident Evil 2 from 2019 is one of the best examples I can provide on how to modernize a classic while still respecting the original source material and improving on it despite me not playing the 1998 original and reworking it to make it an entirely new experience. And even if I haven't really been that much of a horror guy over the past few years, with too many horror movies being pumped out at once, I can safely say for now, as someone who hasn't had any prior experience with Resident Evil 2 was a brilliant start to the franchise for me, and that's why I give Resident Evil 2 the certified gold perk, and overall, I give Resident Evil 2 from 2019 a 10 out of 10. Making my start with the Resident Evil franchise has been a wild ride, and I'm excited to explore more of what the series has to offer. And once I've cleared my over 200 hour backlog, I am sure to jump into 2020's Resident Evil 3 remake at some point in 2025. Resident Evil 4, I'm waiting until I have a PSVR 2 so I can talk about the VR mode in my review as well. But to close on my Resident Evil 2 review, if you haven't played it yet, trust me, it may be the most anxious I've ever been playing a game in my life. More than FNAF, more than Fortnite. But trust me, Resident Evil 2 from 2019 was worth every single moment of anxiety I was put through playing the game. So guys, what did you think of my review of Resident Evil 2? Next on BB8's reviews, I will be reviewing Marvel Rivals. And just before we end the video, I do want to give a shout out to the person who suggested this to me. That being ChuckySkip. Because I'm not even gonna lie here, Resident Evil 2 was a strong suggestion. As the first game from the request form that I've reviewed, this was a strong suggestion. And if you want to be like ChuckySkip and suggest anything for the request form, you can go ahead and fill out the request form in the description below. It can be anything. It can be a video game, like a retro, modern, a remake, or a live service game like Zenless Zone Zero, which I still need to review for some reason, but I haven't. But anything that's not AO rated, I will go ahead and review on the channel. And while I'm trying not to take an awful lot of time to explain this, I have added 2 new categories to my request form, being indies and flow. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss another video like this one in the future. And I will see you all in a future video. BB8 out.